Exclusively on Secular Media Network, this is the Gaytheists Manifesto. Hello and welcome to the Gaytheists Manifesto, your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. I am your host, Callie Wright, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Daniel Wolfsong.
Hey, everyone.
Today on the show, we're discussing next steps after this week's historic SCOTUS decision. Well, last week's historic SCOTUS decision, some of the fallout and what's left to be done, including a report from my friend Xandi, who lives in Alabama, which sort of seems to be the epicenter of all things awful in this case. And we'll end the episode with a Pride Month wrap-up and a Be a Better Ally segment. So, a lot of you may have heard the special live episode that I did after the ruling on Friday, but Daniel couldn't be around. So Daniel, talk to me a little bit about how you're feeling in the wake of this whole thing.
I'm feeling amazing. Actually, you were the one who gave me the news on, was it Friday?
Yeah, it was Friday.
Yep. I was in my kitchen and I got a text from you. I hadn't checked Facebook all morning, and I get onto Facebook.
You mean you don't check Facebook obsessively every 3 minutes like I do?
Well, sometimes. But I got on, and it was just this cascade effect. And within half an hour, Facebook was just this amazing positivity and unity and joy. Everyone, straight people and gay people alike, were just celebrating this moment, and it was really amazing. It was an awesome time.
That's so cool. Yeah, and I mean, I felt the same way. I loved the picture that George Takei posted of the, like, what Facebook is like this morning, and it was this rainbow just shooting out of the screen.
That's exactly what it was. And then when Facebook started doing all the rainbowifying everyone's photos, that made it even more rainbowfied. So it was just a cool thing. It was awesome because so many of the people that I consider my friends, either acquaintances or real friends on Facebook, they are allies for the most part, and they care about LGBT rights and our movement. But just seeing that sort of outpouring of support and happiness on their part was a really awesome thing.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think that kind of moral support is important. I mean, it's not, it's not high level activism. You're not gonna change laws or anything with it, but I think that kind of stuff's important. I mean, it was an amazing feeling to me to see all of those rainbow profile pictures and to see all of my friends so excited. I mean, even my straight cis friends who don't necessarily have a personal dog in the fight. I mean, obviously, they're friends with me, so like they care about someone who it affects.
Yeah.
But someone who for whom their life necessarily isn't super different after this, but that they were still just so excited because all of us now have a right that we didn't before.
And there were just really kind of simple, small things like a new map of where marriage equality exists in the United States. And it was just a rainbow map.
Oh God, I love that so much.
Yeah, stuff like that. It was really cool.
And the White House being lit up in rainbow colors.
Oh my God, that was completely unexpected.
Did you see Franklin Graham losing his mind over that?
I didn't.
Oh my God. So Franklin Graham I think he's either Billy Graham's son or grandson. But God, he posted a picture of that and I mean was just losing his mind. And
I can imagine.
I reflected a lot on the word Schadenfreude this week.
Oh yeah.
So, and in Cincinnati too, there's the Duke Energy Center, one of the big convention centers here, has a big Cincinnati sign that's always lit up white. And they change colors for certain specific occasions. They actually changed it to the trans pride flag colors after Leila Alcorn died. And it was rainbow colored all this weekend.
That's so cool.
So I mean, just, you're right. Just, little stuff like that. That's like, hey, we're with you. And all the companies, changing their social media pictures to, rainbow colors, like the rainbow colored Coke bottles and the rainbow colored smart cars. Those were really cute because I love smart cars.
Yep. And the Skittles one that said something like best time ever to be the rainbow or something like that.
Right.
Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, these companies, they're doing this. I have mixed feelings, but they're doing this because
Right.
they recognize that gay people have money and they like to spend it.
Right.
And that it's a good idea to market to us as well. But also, it's just kind of there's also a bit of a cultural element to that they're saying we know this is going to piss some people off, but we're going to do it anyway because the CEOs and the marketing teams of these companies at least realize that we're here, we exist, and that means that counts for something.
Yeah, I saw two posts that I really loved. Somebody on Yahoo's post that they made where they had the Yahoo with the purple background and they changed the purple background to rainbow colors. And someone said, "I'm deleting my account." And Yahoo customer service responded with, "Sorry to see you go. Here's a link for instructions on how to delete your account."
And don't let the door hit you on your way out.
And there was a guy who owns a photography business, and he changed his company's logo to a rainbow. And someone wrote this big long post about how they weren't going to use him for their wedding anymore, and they wanted their $1,500 retainer back. And he was like, "Cool. Don't want you anyways as a customer, not because of your views, but because you don't think other people have the right to do this despite your views. And oh, by the way, your contract says that your $1,500 retainer isn't refundable, but that's okay. I don't want it, so I'm going to donate it to a gay rights organization."
Their blood was boiling. And
oh my God. I was like ready to just jump out of my chair and cheer and like yell, if it hadn't have been like 3:00 in the morning when I was reading that.
Yeah, same here. I think people, when I say people, I mean bigoted people, homophobic folks. For so long, denigrating gay people and trans people has just been the norm, and they didn't really have to do anything extra. But now that we have a voice and we're being heard and we're being seen and the law is slowly coming to our side, they're getting really upset and really pissed off, and we're seeing just the ugliest vitriol from these folks who really wish that we would just disappear off the face of the earth, but it's not going to happen.
Right. And that's actually a good segue, going back into, because, obviously this is a momentous thing and it's definitely something to be happy about and something to celebrate. But, there were a few pretty striking examples of, where we still are in society. And, in North Carolina, on Sunday, someone walked into a gay bar and was yelling about the Supreme Court's ruling and actually attacked the owner of the bar. And let's see, he got arrested and went to jail. But in San Francisco, somebody was shot at a Pride event. It's not clear whether it was related to the Pride festivities, but it's still pretty significant. In Seattle, a couple was attacked at a Pride event. Let's see. Yeah, somebody ended up with broken nose, cuts, bruises, lost a tooth, broken finger. Yeah. In Seattle, somebody wearing rainbow-colored beads says he was called a homophobic slur, and his attacker placed a gun to his stomach and asked, "Is your life worth that much?" Also in Seattle, later that evening, a couple attacked a transgender person. They said, "Did you enjoy your parade?" and then punched her in the face. And left her on the sidewalk.
Now, I don't know if these things are above and beyond the norm when it comes to hate crimes during pride parades, but I can say this. The timing, the fact that our gay pride just sort of coincided with the Supreme Court decision, a lot of folks are really pissed off and angry. Right. And that's something that I want to remind folks about, is that just because the law is on our side in this instance, not in all cases, we still have a ways to go. But the law is on our side here. this doesn't exempt us from violence, from the blowback from bigoted folks who, when I say they hate us, that's not hyperbole. They hate us. They want us to die. They are violent people, whether it's violence through just their words, whether it's through their activism, their votes, or whether it's physical violence. And this, if anything, has only heightened their resolve to hurt us and to try to erase us.
Yeah. Well, in even more close to home, a business in Cincinnati, an antique store in Cincinnati where I live, was vandalized not too long after they displayed a pride flag.
Right.
After, so isn't
that insane? I mean, like what? I can't think of any any law that's passed that made me so angry that I just wanted to go out and hurt people or destroy the businesses or the property of people who fit into the group that this law, a law was on the side of. It's unbelievable.
Well, right. There was an article that someone wrote about. Actually, no, it was in Scalia's dissent, and he was talking about how, this decision shouldn't have been made by 9 unelected patrician people, blah blah blah. Like, says the guy whose literal career description is that.
And I don't understand what he means when he says unelected. The Supreme Court is elected by presidents.
Well, I mean, they're chosen by leaders who are elected, so at least there's that. But second of all, I mean, that's how the system's set up, and that's what his career is. So if he thinks that's a bad way to go, why is he so heavily involved in it? There's a difference between saying there's a legitimate thing to saying that sometimes you need to get involved in the system and fix it from the inside out. Mm-hmm. But being the literal definition of the system. Right. And saying something like that, that's a little outrageous to me.
Yeah, and I got a little hung up on what he meant by unelected, because aren't the justices of the Supreme Court selected by the presidents themselves?
Yeah, they're selected by the president. Well, they're nominated by the president, and they're confirmed and voted on by, I think, the Senate.
Okay.
Or just Congress in general. I feel bad that I don't know that specifically, but.
So what is he talking about exactly when he talks about 9 unelected people? The Supreme Court doesn't seem to describe the justices of the Supreme Court.
It's the argument from opinion is basically what he's trying to say. He's trying to say he was trying to make the states' rights argument that states should be able to legalize this if the people in the states want it to be legal, but it shouldn't be up to us to make that decision. Says the person responsible for, striking down the birth control thing in the Hobby Lobby case.
Right, you can have it both ways.
Yeah, which I don't remember conservatives being so concerned about the power that the Supreme Court wields there. The same justices in the same court, by the way, who made that decision. I don't remember them being so worked up over the Citizens United decision.
Right.
That they loved so much. I don't remember them lamenting the fact that was a violation of states' rights, that the states should be able to decide that whole thing because they got their way.
Yeah, and states don't get to decide one group gets this right but another group doesn't because we don't like them. That's not how it should work, and that's why the Supreme Court intervened.
Well, right. I mean, the Constitution of the United States does override state law, in many, if not most, cases. One more example that I found literally almost right before we started recording. So, a guy who owns a hardware store literally put a sign in his window saying "No gays allowed."
Where was this?
I copied and pasted a little bit from the article and
Granger County.
Yeah, Granger County, but I'm not sure where Granger County is.
Okay, it's this is very reminiscent of the civil rights movement in the 60s when black people had to deal with businesses putting up signs like that. No black people allowed, or, black people will have to use the back, or things like that. And, we're going to look back on this, the collective we're going to look back on this 50 years from now. And with the same sense of how were we like this? How did this actually happen that people treated gay and trans people this way? And It's just the nature of the movement. This is a phase that we have to go through, because now that law and culture is catching up with us, there are going to be those people who hate us, who want to make sure that everyone knows.
Eastern Tennessee, by the way, is where that
Tennessee.
hardware store is. Yeah, I found that.
Gotcha. I figured it was someplace in the South.
So, yeah, and his quote at the end of this article is fantastic. They gladly stand for what they believe in. Why can't I? They believe their way is right. I believe it's wrong. But yet I'm going to take more persecution than them because I'm standing for what I believe in.
Right, because we have not experienced any persecution at all for standing up for what we believe in, right?
Right, because having your feelings hurt by things that someone says is exactly the same as having your rights denied and having violence against you being ignored and not having access to health care and having people look the other way when you're murdered, when you're raped, when you're assaulted.
Getting beat up coming out of a gay club, getting beat up walking down the street with your lover. Yeah, those are on par with society telling you that you're an idiot for putting up a homophobic sign on your store.
Yeah, I have a friend, a black friend, who posted something about racism that, and I want to preface this by saying that I very, very much am sensitive to the idea. Like, I don't want to appropriate things that people say about racism for the LGBT situation.
Right.
But because racism and transphobia and homophobia are not the same thing.
They're not the same. They have parallels, but they each are their own separate.
Exactly. But basically what she was saying is, the idea that when black people speak out against racism and white people get their feelings hurt by it, it's kind of hard to feel sympathy because white people don't know what it's like to be systematically oppressed like so many black people do. And I kind of feel like that's the situation here. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm not sympathetic to you over your hurt feelings.
Yeah, your homophobic hurt feelings do not elicit any sympathy from me. And you know what? And not just from gay people. Straight people care about this too.
Right,
and
exactly.
That's what a lot of folks don't realize for some reason. The homophobic, bigoted guys, they think that somehow only gay people care about gay rights. That's not the case.
Right, and I mean there's still that elementary school attitude of like, oh, if you support gays, you must be gay. Mm-hmm. Like, ugh, God.
It's like, well, there's more science that supports that if you're homophobic, you might be homosexual.
Right. Well, and I had a friend post on Facebook. There were some pretty offensive. There was some pretty offensive imagery in a pride parade about Christianity or whatever, and it was like two gay guys kissing each other while nailed to a cross, stuff like that, and he was asking the question like, why would you do something like this? And, and I mean, it was a more long and involved post than that, and frankly, not really worth going that much into. But, kind of what I had to say to him is like, look, that's not something that I would ever really go out of my way to do. I'm not super into the idea of offending people for the sake of offending people. Right. If in the course of saying something legitimate or doing legitimate activism, I offend someone, sorry, don't care.
Sorry, not sorry.
But I'm not going to go out of my way to be in someone's face and offend them just for its own sake. I think that's kind of ridiculous.
I agree.
That being said, I absolutely understand where these people are coming from when they do stuff like this. Because if the worst thing that my community can do to you is offend you and hurt your feelings, sorry, I just don't care.
Yeah.
Because what the religious right has done to my community has killed people.
Yeah. People live in fear in some places in our country just for being gay. And I mean, if you're trans, you have a much harder journey.
Well, so, kind of laying out the situation as to where we're at. I mean, in 29 states, you can still be fired from your job for being gay. And some of those states are right to work states where you can be fired for any reason. We're going to hear from Xandi a little bit, but in the conversation that we had, we talked about where, I mean, she could be fired from her job for being atheist.
Yeah.
Even though her job has literally nothing to do with religion.
That's what happens when you live in a right to work state.
Right.
That's what right to work is. It literally says you don't have a right to work. You don't have a right to, be able to support yourself and your family. That is a privilege, and we can fire you for any reason that we want to.
And more poignantly, well, not more poignantly, but 34 states, you can lose your job for being trans, including the state that I live in Ohio. We heard on our Trans 101 episode that Andre was really surprised that, when I lost my job over being trans, that I didn't sue my boss. And, I don't really have recourse for that. Now, I have learned since that generally you can make the argument that that's sex discrimination. But that's, of course, assuming that a trans person is going to have the money to pay for the lawyer to do that.
You're still losing your job. And now you've got to go to court and fight a battle that you may or may not win. And Andre is not the only one who was surprised by that. Literally every straight person I've talked to, including my brother, my dad, and some friends of mine, were completely incredulous about that. They're like, "What do you mean? That's not right. Equal opportunity employment and things like that. That does not include sexual orientation and gender identity in all states."
Right. And I mean, I'm lucky enough to work for a company that has a really strong non-discrimination policy. So I feel pretty safe at work despite that.
Good.
But, not everyone is that fortunate. I mean, I work for a very large company, and, generally speaking, the larger the company, the more safe you are at work as, a trans or queer person. But, I mean, even that's not the case in all cases.
Yeah. And I just want to talk for just a second about when people say, well, why, when it comes to your job, do you even have to be open? Do you have to be open about being gay or being trans? And I can tell you from my own experience, I can hide being gay to an extent in past jobs, but there are so many things that in a job, things like having work functions where you're invited to bring your spouse or your partner, your boyfriend or your girlfriend, having family photos on your desk.
Just basic conversations. Yeah, exactly.
Just conversation, because everyone you work with at some point is going to say, "Hey, do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a girlfriend?" And these are just everyday things that straight folks take for granted. That if you live in a state, and this is 29 states for being gay. I mean, more for being trans. 29. That's more than half of the states in our country. That takes a toll. That takes a toll on your psyche, that you feel like you constantly have to hide for fear that you could be fired and lose everything, just for something that straight folks take for granted.
Yeah, well, and that's happened to me at work. I mean, innocent conversations, and luckily the person that I ended up having this conversation with was totally open and totally cool. Mm-hmm. We'd started talking about, we were talking about the wedding that I was in. A good friend of mine got married, and I was in his wedding, and I was in his wedding party, and I was one of two girls in his wedding party. And I was talking about some of my friends, and she kind of remarked that, like, wow, you have an inordinate number of guy friends for being a girl. And I said, yeah, I guess that's a little abnormal. And I mean, I could just kind of see where the conversation was going.
Yeah.
And so she asked me if I had a boyfriend, and I just said no. I didn't want to go all like social justice warrior and be like, well, actually, I'm bisexual, so don't assume I'm straight, But I was like, I mean, in theory, like, I'm bi. I like dudes. I could be in a relationship with a guy in theory, whatever. I kind of justified it to myself like that.
Sure.
But later on, we were talking about finances or something like that. And I was talking about how I'm making double payments on my car right now because my car is still in my ex's name. And I want to get it paid off to, be able to sever that tie. And when I said my car's in my ex's name, she goes, "Your ex-boyfriend?" And I said, "Well, actually my ex-girlfriend."
Deal with it.
And right. And she did that, like her head kind of cocked to the side a little bit, and she looked kind of confused for a second. Exactly. And she was like, "You like girls?" And I was like, "Well, actually I like both. I'm bi." And she said, "Oh, okay." And then she asked me how long I've known. And I was like, oh my God, this conversation is so more complicated than you're prepared for. You have no idea what you're getting into, because like, she obviously didn't recognize that I was trans.
Huh.
And yeah, so I just said, like, oh, right around puberty. and then like 2 days later, it's really slow, and she turns around, because I work in a call center, so these conversations are really fun because I drop a bomb and then get a call and have to turn around and just leave it.
BRB.
Right.
Yeah.
So one day it's really slow, and she turns around and she goes, so what do you think about this whole Bruce Jenner situation?
So yeah.
And I was like, oh,
that's fair.
Damn it. Okay. So I started, and I did basically the thing that I did in the segment on our show when we talked about it. And I was like, well, visibility for the trans community is a good thing, but there's backlash, and trans people are pretty vulnerable, and
not all visibility is created equal.
Right. And she was like, well, that's just not something that I know a lot about. And I kind of let it hang in the air for a second, and I was like, I'm trans, right? And she was just like, what? And and she was just blown away. And and eventually, we had a good conversation about it. She was really cool, and she asked me some good questions, and everything was good. And now, now that that's all out of the way, we just have regular everyday conversations. And
that had to feel like a mythical creature just appeared in front of her.
Exactly. I just found a unicorn.
The real.
Right. But in immediately my fear was that there was someone sitting around us that wasn't so cool about it, that am I going to hear from HR about having this conversation with a person,
or are you going to just be treated unfairly by someone who you work with?
Well, right. And speaking of, there's someone at work who I know I make very uncomfortable. And it's not because he outwardly treats me badly or, has said anything, but I'm the only person at work who he's not super, super chummy with.
Gotcha.
When it comes to him and I, it's strictly business. And he always helps me when I need it. He always gives me the right information, because he's what we call a lead. So he's the one that kind of, helps us out if we have problems, because I do tech support. And he's never not helped me. He always gives me good information, and he always does his job, but it stops there with me. And with everyone else, he's telling stories, laughing, making jokes, being buddy, and all that stops with me. So,
that sucks.
Yeah, it does. And I think that's, something that's important. Even in a company that has a strong anti-discrimination law, if I wanted to be super strict about it, like if I went to HR and said that, there's nothing that they could do. And frankly, I'm not sure that there's anything that I would want them to do, because I think that's a little fascist. Because he's doing his job. Okay. But that's just an illustration that even being in a company that has 100% on the HRC Corporate Equality Index, and has really good trans inclusive health insurance, and a really strong enumerated anti-discrimination policy, there are still ways that you're excluded and othered and made to feel like you're kind of not part of the group. There's someone else there. I don't know if I mentioned this on the show before, but we were in a meeting, and we were reading about this new company policy, and when the company policy refers to the hypothetical person, it was typed he/she. And every single time, and we go around the table and we read these articles out loud. And every single time someone passed over the he/she, she would just look up at me.
That is so obnoxious.
And just little stuff like that. That's like,
what does that hurt you? What does that hurt you for just that a trans person exists?
Right, I'm sitting in the room at the table, and I work in the same building as you. What?
You're some terrible criminal who's committed all these heinous crimes, and she just can't bear to be in the same room as you.
Yeah, and going back to the sort of situation. I looked up statistics, because I reference a lot on the show the heightened rate of suicide that our community faces. And every time I bring it up, I always, I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, so I wanted to look up the statistics, so we had them here. So what I found was that 4.6% of the overall U.S. population has self-reported a suicide attempt. If you're LGB, lesbian, gay, or bi, that number climbs to between 10 and 20%. For trans people, it's up over 41%.
Yes.
And, that number didn't change on Friday.
Right. And that goes back to the law changes, and then society takes a long time to catch up with that, right?
Right, because, here we are 50 years after the Civil Rights Act, and we still live in an incredibly racist country.
Exactly. Someone asked me, my boyfriend Derek and I were at an improv show over the weekend, and afterwards we met we actually met this guy who was also gay. He was like, "You guys are a couple, right?" And we were talking, and he was asking me, do you think it's ever going to get any better? And I said, yeah, I do. I do think it's going to get better, but it's going to take a long time.
Yeah. Well, and I even, I recently, I don't think I've said it on the show. I recently joined the local steering committee for the Cincinnati Human Rights Campaign as their volunteer co-chair. So I'm going to be the person in charge of, getting volunteers for all their events and stuff. So I'm excited to be a part of that organization. So now I'm on the kind of email list that all the steering committee members have. And somebody sent an email to us about apparently someone who one of us knows was in a Family Dollar the other day. And for those who don't know, Family Dollar is just like kind of a cheap like retail store, like dollar store in the United States. And an employee was saying very loudly that, gays don't deserve a parade. The Supreme Court lost its mind. And the person that we know turns around and says like, hey, like that's not cool. And then the employee went and called the police and said that person was trespassing and tried to get them arrested.
Wow.
So like these things are not going to stop, and it wouldn't even surprise me if they happen more often, given this. I've definitely been more on guard outside of, queer and trans spaces since then.
Yeah, and something I haven't thought a lot about this, but some gay friends of mine were telling me that the fact that the Supreme Court decision is in our favor is great, but he's expecting this huge backlash, this huge violent backlash, I should say. And he and his partner actually went out to buy some guns and were taking courses on how to properly shoot a gun. I wouldn't do that. That would never be my state of mind. But this just goes to show you that there's a very real sense of fear.
A justified sense of fear too. It's not like this is some, silly paranoia where like we're making up enemies and, fearing this for no reason. These are justified fears.
Yeah. And they come from the fact that people are already violent against us. And some states more than others, of course. I live in an area where I haven't had to worry about that sort of thing. But, I live in Richmond. I'm not going to walk hand in hand with my boyfriend in certain areas of the city at night, just because I don't know what kind of folks are out there. And things like that are just sort of part of what comes when you're a queer person. These are things that, and I know a lot of straight folks probably don't think about this, and they take it for granted, but violence is a very real fear when it comes to being whether it's gay or bi or trans, because there are violent people who like to hurt folks like us. And this decision has enraged a lot of people. Like I said earlier, it's a lot of folks think the country has just gone ass backwards and is going down the toilet. And there's this sense of vigilante justice that a lot of homophobes are taking upon themselves to enact, and it's scary to think about.
It really is. And that's something that, I'm always on guard anyways, when I'm in public, especially if I have to go to the bathroom in a public restroom, like, I'm still on guard all the time. And, in a lot of ways, even more so after Friday. And, I think that's important for people to recognize who may not necessarily think about these things all the time, that those kinds of situations actually, and again, I mean, it comes back to the problem of visibility, right? So visibility is great. Everybody's talking about these issues now, but that also increases the backlash.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to recognize that. And that's why I think it's important for us to recognize that we're not there. And, we're still, not only are we not there, we're still a far away from there. And we still have a whole lot of work left to do. We're going to take a quick break, and we are going to be back. We're going to talk to my friend Xandi about what she's seen going on and where she lives in Alabama. More Gaytheist Manifesto coming up.
Hello, I'm Alan Cumming. Live Out Loud is calling on the LGBT community to help improve life for gay teens. Take what you know and gay it forward through the Homecoming Project, a chance to return to your old high school and share your story with LGBTQ youth. Your life experiences and wisdom can prove invaluable to teens who may be struggling with their own identities and paths in life. One day can make a lasting difference. Gay it forward with the Homecoming Project. Find us at liveoutloud.info to learn how you can get involved today.
Before we jump back into the show, it's time to thank our patrons. This week we're recognizing Johnny. Thank you so much for believing in us enough to contribute to us financially and for being a part of this movement. Patrons of the Gaytheist Manifesto have access to all sorts of cool stuff, like a big shout out on the show, premium content, including an audio journal I've decided to keep documenting the more personal stuff I don't dive into on the show, and an exclusive patrons only hangout once a month. If you're so inclined, head over to patreon.com/the Gaytheist Manifesto to become a part of this movement and support the show. Thank you. All right, I'm here with my good friend Xandi. Xandi is a resident of Alabama, which is sort of the epicenter of lots of awful things surrounding the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision. Xandi, talk to me about Alabama. Tell me what's going on down there.
It's the epicenter of bigotry in general. So I don't know why. I just expected things to be different because the Supreme Court had ruled, but today my news feed was completely different on Facebook than it was Friday. It was all of these individuals expressing grievances and talking about the different counties that aren't issuing marriage licenses or are specifically declining them to same-sex couples, with no legal ground for that. So it's really depressing. It's just that these individuals just want to deny rights to others on the grounds that somehow allowing everyone to have the same rights is discriminatory against those who've always been privileged.
So because conservatives have such respect for the rule of law, is what you're saying? Like that's because that's something they preach about a lot is the rule of law. So they're doing a super good job of.
Well, no, it's states' rights. We talked about we talked about the Confederate flag last week, and earlier this month I was kind of infiltrated a sanctity of marriage rally.
God, I am glad you got out alive.
I know, it was awesome. I held a sign that said, "I don't follow your religion and you can't make me."
Oh, yes, I saw that picture on Facebook. That was fantastic.
Yes. That rally, one of their keynote speakers was actually Chief Justice Roy Moore's wife.
Of course it was.
Who specifically spoke out against, I I can't remember how she worded it, but she spoke out against other justices and said that her husband has what she calls judicial ethics, and that's why he wasn't present at the rally, because he can't participate in those types of activities.
So he sent his wife instead.
Right. So he just sent his wife, but yeah. So that happened, and then he makes this statement that on Friday about how he's going to uphold the law. This is the law of the land, and I'm going to respect that. And I'm not going to. I think his quote was that he wasn't going to use his powers to defy the ruling. And we all laughed that, what powers does he have to defy that ruling? But
invisibility, shape-shifting.
Right. So he puts on this whole show about he's going to be so ethical and abide by the law. But meanwhile, what everyone doesn't realize, and what's not being covered in all of these stories in the media, is that while he may not be saying anything, he's sending his wife to do it, because she spoke to the press that exact same day and said, this fight's not over. We're going to keep fighting this, and we're going to challenge this ruling. So,
well, right, and I mean, I've talked on the show before about how I'm sort of over the idea of just talking about all the stupid things that politicians say and do, because it's easy, right? Like, we all know conservatives are going to say and do stupid things. Ha ha ha! We can all laugh. We can make fun of it. But I was honestly surprised at this. Maybe this was just me being overly optimistic, but I was seriously thinking to myself, there will probably be some weeping and gnashing of teeth over this, and lots of, stuff about how this is wrong and we can't support it or whatever. But I always expected the caveat of but the Supreme Court's ruled, so this is the law. We're going to have to do it even though we don't like it.
Right.
Maybe that was silly of me.
It's so naive
to think that.
All of these people who are elected to uphold the law are going to do exactly that.
Right.
And it's something that, living in Alabama, you come to expect that it's not going to always go the way that it's legally supposed to. The justice system it's not just. It's completely the opposite. And I just took an ethics class this spring in my master's program, and my instructor told us that Alabama law is written to encourage and promote corruption. And I think that's absolutely true.
In what way? Because
you see all of these freedom of religion blah blahs, and Alabama expects that everyone is Christian, and so no one's going to challenge it. This is Alabama, and if you don't like it, get out. So they use that as, this, with that and this persecution complex, to say that forcing them to follow the law is somehow a violation of their religious freedom. And I cannot wrap my head around it.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess so. I grew up in Cincinnati. I've lived in Cincinnati for all of my life except for a year. Mm-hmm. And I always grew up thinking that Cincinnati, was a really conservative city. And I found that that's not, the situation is a little more complicated than that. And so, I think for somebody like me who has grown up in a city like Cincinnati, it's hard for me to even imagine being in a place like that where things are just so backwards.
And it's also hard for me to imagine being in a place where I am treated as a normal citizen and everyone else has the exact same rights.
Well, right, because I think it's important to point out, I mean, this is something that you've talked about often, like, some of the things that, I have personally zero fear over being mistreated for being atheist. Like, maybe some derisive comments or whatever, some rolling eyes or whatever, but I don't really have much fear of being mistreated for being an atheist. But
Right.
I mean, you live in a place where being an atheist is still a dangerous thing in a lot of ways sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, well, this is a right to work state. So, for one, I could be fired for literally anything. I could be fired for using birth control if my employer thinks that that's unethical or whatever. I've known individuals who got divorced here and lost custody of their kids because the spouse was Christian, and the judge said the kids need to grow up with faith. So there are so many consequences that they just don't exist anywhere else in the U.S. It's insane. And you think, the U.S., we stand for freedom of expression and everyone should be able to. No, it's not like that here, because anyone can, if you're the minority belief anyway, then yeah, anyone can come back at you and you can be targeted. I was refused a job because of my atheism, and I was refused a protection order from a dangerous situation because I'm atheist. So it promotes this concept and this weird feeling of guilt, because everyone, when everyone around you thinks that you're wrong, eventually, as much as I try to remind myself that I'm not wrong, that I'm the only one who's thinking rationally, and I'm the only one who's standing up for what's right, it still sinks in a little bit, that that feeling of guilt, and like, why does everyone else think differently than me?
Well, right. And I think, I don't know, I mean, I think that kind of brings up another important point. I mean, I wanted to have you on to talk about, how the Supreme Court ruling is not the last, the last thing to go, even when it comes to marriage equality, because, so many states are just outright refusing to follow the law. And, and I have a very strong feeling that these states are going to force someone to sue them to stop, to stop acting that way.
Right.
But I think this brings up the other side of the conversation as to why I do this show in the first place, and why I think there is so much more intersection than people realize between LGBT and atheist activism. Because the situation that you just described to me over the things that you faced for being atheist, legal problems, court situations where you're disadvantaged because you don't believe in God. I mean, I know people who have been through those exact same things. People lose custody of their kids because they're gay or because they're trans, or
Right.
The cops don't investigate. You get the crap beat out of you, and the cops don't even bother investigating because you're trans, because you were probably out prostituting. So I think that brings up another important point as to why this whole thing makes sense.
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin. It's this weird environment where if you're Christian, you can wear the t-shirt, you can wear the cross necklace, you can display it publicly. No one's gonna talk to you about it or question it or think of you differently or judge you for it, except me. I will, but
Right.
that, like, I couldn't. So casual Friday at work. Other coworkers wear their t-shirts from their church. I couldn't wear a ReasonCon t-shirt or anything that says hey, by the way, I'm atheist. Or, which I do have those. I do have those t-shirts, but I couldn't wear that on casual Friday at work. I could get fired.
Well, and obviously, we don't have to do specifics, but I mean, my understanding is that you work for a pretty liberal organization. Is that accurate? Should be
pretty liberal, but
not.
Yeah, well, actually, when it came to the HRC, they have the list of LGBT friendly businesses and
the Equality Index.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I went to my boss and asked him, hey, do you want to sign this on our behalf or do you want me to? Because I didn't think it was even a question whether or not we would sign. We are an LGBT facility. Our mission is serving the LGBT population. So I didn't hear back from him after I emailed him the petition and or the pledge form, and I finally asked him about it. I said, did you ever get my email? And he says, yeah, I'm going to have to talk to our board about that because they try not to take a political stance. And I'm like, this isn't a political thing. This is human rights, and human rights should not be politicized. They're just human rights. Like, I don't understand why you get to decide and vote on them.
Right. And for those who may not know what we're talking about, the Human Rights Campaign is the largest, if not one of the largest, LGBT civil rights organizations in the United States. And yearly they put out a report called the Corporate Equality Index, where they rate various companies on their LGBT inclusiveness. And they look at things like trans-inclusive healthcare, same-sex spouse benefits, enumerated non-discrimination policies that cover gender identity and sexual orientation, and whether or not your company is involved in the community and outwardly expresses support for the community. And, to score 100, you have to be pretty overtly LGBT friendly. I mean, I think 10 points on the score are whether or not you go to LGBT events, like if your company's at Pride or whatever. So this is a thing that they do every year. Thankfully, the company that I work for has 100%, and that's part of the reason that I work there. But so you're saying your company wasn't even interested in signing the petition to even get a score?
Exactly. So the door-to-door part of the campaign where they say, do you support equal rights? And all you do is sign it? That's the part I'm talking about. I mean, it was so simple. It was so simple that I almost just signed it myself because I hadn't heard back from my boss. And then I'm glad I double-checked with him, but why is it so controversial in 2015 to say that I think everyone deserves the same rights and opportunities?
Well, right, because, I mean, so as an atheist, obviously an outspoken atheist activist, if I owned a company, there is literally no way that I would disadvantage someone or fire them or whatever for being a devout Christian, because it has absolutely nothing to do with the job. I mean, unless I'm running an atheist organization, but right. If I, start a marketing company or, something like that, right. Someone's religion, it just doesn't play into it. And, the fact that I'm trans, the fact that I'm bi, none of that affects my ability to do my job. So why should it even be a thing?
Well, two thoughts. First, I think if it doesn't affect your ability to do your job.
if you can job.
You can job. No, if it doesn't affect your ability to do your job or perform the duties that your job requires, then yeah, it doesn't fucking matter. Oh, sorry, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
So, for instance, when I was in the military and someone said, well, so and so was smoking pot, and I think they're going to get kicked out. Why? Why? Did they mess up on the job? Did they do something that, affected their job performance? That's the question. But not to completely derail. Your personal views don't affect your ability to do your job either. So I am atheist, and if I say that in my position, I could be fired. I could be fired. And I was refused a job from a national nonprofit organization that I thought was very liberal.
I was just going to say, yeah, I think I remember you telling me about that. And like, good God, if there is a list of liberal organizations that liberal harder than the most liberals, like, wow.
The reason though was that because I am in the Deep South region, that would affect my ability to connect with other individuals in the community. So they're key stakeholders in my area. It would, if they knew that I was atheist, it would affect, donor contributions and all of those other things. And so to appeal to the masses here, I guess they need a Christian in that position, which is completely asinine.
Even in a liberal organization, that blows my mind.
Well, if I could say what this organization does, but I don't want to. But
no, I understand.
Find a Christian that supports that mission.
Right. Well, I don't know. There are lots of Catholics. Whatever. But yeah. So I think the bottom line here is that lots of history has been made in the past week or so, but there's far much more progress. That was a terribly constructed sentence. There is far more to do. There we go. Far more to do before we're even close, because places like Alabama are still seemingly 30 years behind everyone else. And let me ask you this. So you're in Alabama. Do you get the impression that it's the same or similar in other states in the South? Or is Alabama uniquely bad in this way? Or
I think, I don't know. I mostly, there's so much to focus on here that I don't get a lot of time to look at the other southern states, but I know that Georgia just tried to prosecute a woman for trying to self-medicate, trying to abort her own fetus because she couldn't get access to a medical abortion there. They prosecuted her. They tried to charge her with murder when she went to the hospital to save her life. Basically, she was having complications and thought she was bleeding a lot, and she went to the hospital, and they said, "Okay, murder, you're in jail now, and we're gonna charge you and try to get the death penalty because you killed a baby." So there's that, and then there's
wow.
Yeah.
And to be logically consistent, I'm sure they charged every woman who had a miscarriage with manslaughter, right?
Of course not. Because when God kills things, it's okay.
Listen, I love you, but you depress me.
A fetus and not a person.
Right.
But, yeah, I think that it's pretty similar around here. I mean, I follow a lot of women's rights issues, so
Sure.
Mississippi, I know they, for instance, only have one abortion facility in the whole state because of trap laws and all of these different restrictions that they're placing.
Yeah, actually, I think Ohio only has like 2.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and they I can't remember if it was a state law or if it was a city law, but there's one clinic, I think somewhere in Cincinnati, that's actually fighting to stay open because they tried to pass one of those laws saying that you had to have hospital admitting privileges.
Oh, they did that down here, and it passed, and then I mean, it's just like one thing after the other. Like, so recently there was I probably told you about this, but there was a bill that it actually might get passed during the special session because I think it was just put on hold because it was too controversial. But there was a public hearing for this bill. I think it was HB 527. I don't know. I might have my numbers mixed up, but they were trying to pass a law to say that abortion facilities or facilities that perform abortion specifically can't be within 2,000 feet of a school. And the purpose for that was the individuals who put this whole bill together said, we don't think that children should be exposed to our graphic protest signs that we are entitled to hold up under our freedom of speech that's protected. So we have this right to, protest at the abortion clinic because blah, blah, blah. But we don't think children should see it, so we think that the abortion clinic should have to move because this abortion clinic, specifically this one in Huntsville, Alabama, is too close to a school. So rather than targeting the protesters, all these legislators are like, yeah, that's a good idea. They shouldn't see all these abortions because obviously when an abortion clinic is near a school, that's exactly what all of the kids see is the abortion procedure being performed.
Right, and they toss the fetuses into the playground and laugh because that's what us horrible liberals do. We laugh while tossing crying fetuses into the fire. Jesus Christ.
They call it child sacrifice, and they call it the death camp, and all these other things. But here's what's so crazy that no one's really talking about in the media is that clinic that they're specifically targeting and singling out with this bill it was targeted by those trap laws last year that forced them to move because they had to relocate because their hallways weren't wide enough or some crap.
Oh my God.
So they relocated at the expense of the clinic. It was $500,000 for them to move to this new location. And before they located there, they had a public hearing that all of these opponents were at. And they said, so the clinic staff said, are you sure it's okay? We're really close to a school. And they basically said, yeah, sure, it's fine. So basically what they're doing is like, now we know you can't afford to move again. So let's find another reason to try to make you to move.
So real quick, explain trap laws.
Don't ask me to tell you the acronym because I know the acronyms and I don't know what they stand for.
Gotcha.
It is literally what it sounds like. It's a law. It's laws that are aimed at restricting access to abortion with the intent of shutting down abortion clinics. So,
gotcha. And they're the kind of laws that are passed under the guise of, well, we want women to be safe.
Exactly. They try to say, well, we're protecting women, and so that's why the hallway has to be this wide. But I'm sorry. A transvaginal ultrasound is not medically necessary, and it doesn't protect me at all, and I don't think that that's necessary at all. It's just gross. So, I don't know. It's just silly little things like that. And there's actually a pretty cool documentary being filmed right now called Trapped, and they're following all of these clinics. They actually came to the clinic here in Montgomery and talked about this rally where Roy Moore and his terror organizations that he's associated with are coming to our clinic in a couple of weeks. And they kind of documented some of our preparation for that. It's really scary. I don't even trust that we'll have, I know this sounds really bad. I want to believe that the police are going to be there if we call them and say, hey, there's a guy here, or there's a person here, or whatever. They're walking they're onto clinic property. But I just don't feel like anyone in Alabama is on our side. So it's just a really weird situation to be in.
God. And it just, again, it blows my mind how when you talk about things like this, how so similar it sounds to things that I've heard people in the trans and queer community say.
Really?
Oh gosh, yeah. When it comes to, in not necessarily in Cincinnati, because the Cincinnati Police Department, has a history of race problems. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to LGBT stuff, we actually have an LGBT liaison officer on the Cincinnati Police Department, and she's absolutely incredible. And she's done a lot of work, educating the police on, LGBT competency and stuff like that. So it hasn't been quite that, here where I live, but, people just don't feel like they're being looked after or protected by the authorities because the authorities either just plain don't care or they think we're doing something nefarious. Like if you're a trans woman walking down the street wearing any sort of revealing clothing, you're automatically a prostitute. Yeah. Or, if the list goes on and on. A trans woman gets raped and people think it's funny.
Oh my God.
Stuff like that. And it's, when you say stuff like that, I'm like, oh my God, like this, it's really that bad for other issues too. Like it's not just our community. And, and I think this whole thing is best summed up. When I was at Pride on Saturday, there was an atheist group there. To my knowledge, the first time an atheist group has ever been at our Pride in Cincinnati. And they had a banner that said religion is the primary barrier for equality or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, yeah, because if you look at all of these issues, who is at the forefront of the opposition? It's the religious right. Mm-hmm. Plain and simple.
But when you say that, you're persecuting them.
Right.
So I don't understand how we're supposed to... How is it okay that they can express all of these hateful views? And I know that the defense is always, well, I'm not that kind of Christian. Or, we're not all like that. Okay, fine. But the majority who are opposing us are. And so when they do it in your name or in the name of the thing that you follow or believe in or base your life on and represent, I don't know how to separate that. I'm sorry. Like you're part of that group. And so, yes, that's what's going on. But if I was to say, I don't support the idea of imaginary friends, then that's persecution and that's me being hateful and intolerant and all of these things. And it's not. I made this simple statement a couple of nights ago because I was trying to make it as polite as possible. And I said, I think that the belief in a supernatural being is irrational. And I was told that that was persecution and that was shoving my beliefs down people's throats. And I'm like, how? How are you free to express all of your hateful views? But I say one thing, and I'm judged so much more harshly. It doesn't make sense. It's not fair. And, when are we going to get past this and work together as a society just to make the world a better place? I judge people for their actions. Why am I judged because I just don't believe the same?
Well, and it's not just that they express these views, it's that they wield power with these views. Right. Because if I was going around actually killing Christians for being Christian, or, burning down churches or going into people's churches and disrupting their church services, then they might have a legit argument that there was some sort of persecution happening, right? Mm-hmm. But they're doing far more than just expressing, because at this point, like, all we have done is speak out. And when we win, it doesn't actually affect them at all. There is no right that they had that's ever been taken away. All that we have done is elevate ourselves slightly. Mm-hmm. And what happens is, when you've had an unjustified privilege for so long, losing that unjustified privilege starts to look like oppression to you. Right.
That's exactly it, is that they're losing their power. And I am actually scared of how they're going to react. I feel like there's probably some kind of underground revolt being planned. I mean, they keep talking all of this fire and brimstone things, and I wonder if that's not, a lot of it sounds very threatening, and it's scary, because when you really believe that strongly in an afterlife and in, rewards in the afterlife for defending that irrational belief that you have, then all kinds of things are justified. So,
well, right, and I think, I've had thoughts like that. Like, even before Pride on Saturday, I was thinking to myself, like, wow, how amazing is it that our Pride Festival is the day after the marriage equality ruling? Right. And then I thought to myself, like, I wonder if there is some conservative nut job out there ready to make a name for himself as a hero for religious freedom, and as ready to go kill some queers at the Pride Parade. You know what I mean? Yeah. And on the surface that may sound absurd, but when you look at the actual violence that our community faces, I don't think that's an unjustified fear. I mean, I wasn't walking around terrified all day in a heightened state of panic but I was just kind of on guard. But and I don't think that's an unjustified feeling.
It's not. And I don't know what the law is where you are, but here we're an open carry state. Literally anyone can own a firearm and carry it around, as long as it's not concealed. So it's very frightening to think that there are these angry people out there with vendettas who can possess firearms. And I don't know. I don't know how to. How do I protect myself? There was someone talked about earlier. Actually, it's Patricia Todd, a representative here in North Alabama. She said there was a report of a man who had an HRC logo on his car, who was followed by another car, and the driver pulled a gun on him. And they think that it was just because his car had an HRC logo, and this individual was probably upset about the ruling. And I'm terrified. I not only have an HRC logo on my car, but I have a humanist sticker as well. And does that mean that I should be carrying a firearm to protect my right to be a humanist and a supporter of equality? I don't understand how am I supposed to feel safe?
Well, I think that I don't know. I think that's kind of a poignant place to stop, because I think among the celebrations this week that I definitely participated in. So this isn't me saying like, oh, we were partying when we shouldn't have been. I was definitely partying too. But I think there are lots and lots of sobering reminders of the work that we still have to do and the reality of how bad things really are in some places. And, yes, we have come a long way, but, we started from such a low point to begin with that's not really saying much.
Right.
So, from someone in the trenches, in the thick of it, Xandi, thank you for, doing what you do despite the fear, despite the risk, and thanks for coming on to talk to us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
More Gaytheist Manifesto right after this.
The staff of Secular Coalition for America lobbies U.S. Congress on issues of separation of church and state, and they've become a powerhouse for change in the United States government. You'll definitely want to subscribe to receive their email action alerts. These are updates for important issues and ones that you can get involved with directly. And hopefully, you'll consider making a contribution to the Secular Coalition for America to help them continue fighting for your equality. You can do it all at secular.org.
Today in school, I learned a lot. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me. In English, I learned that I'm disgusting. And in physics, I learned that I'm a loser.
Today in school, I learned that I'm ugly and useless. And in gym, I learned that I'm pathetic and a joke. In history, I learned that I'm trash.
Today in school, I learned that I have no friends. In English, I learned that I make people sick. And at lunch, I learned that I sit on my own because I smell. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me.
In biology, I learned that I'm fat and stupid. And in math, I learned that I'm trash.
The only thing I didn't learn in school today?
The only thing I didn't learn today?
The only thing I didn't learn
is why no one ever helps.
Kids witness bullying every day. They want to help, but they don't know how. Teach them how to stop bullying and be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov.
Welcome back to the show. So something that's pretty significant about this Supreme Court decision is that it happened as most of the major cities in the country were wrapping up Pride Month. And for those who don't know, June is historically Pride Month, where most cities have their Pride parades and festivals, and we commemorate the Stonewall riots, which a lot of people don't recognize that the celebration of Pride is the celebration of an anti-oppression riot and uprising that trans people were largely responsible for.
Yes.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about why Pride is important, why it's an important thing to celebrate, and why it matters. So Daniel, you had something you particularly wanted to say.
Yeah, I've seen you mentioned a guy earlier, and I've heard a lot of folks mirror the sentiment that it seems silly, proud of being gay, or it seems silly to be proud of being trans, and they've used examples like, well, I'm a straight person, I don't need a parade, or I'm a white person, I don't feel like I did anything to earn that, so why should I feel proud of it? And frankly, that's coming from a place of privilege, because you'll usually only hear, when it comes to gay pride, you'll only hear straight folks saying things like that. But the reason for pride, first of all, like Callie was saying, the Stonewall Inn riots of 1969 came from when it was actually illegal to be gay in public, believe it or not, in the United States, and cops were constantly raiding this Stonewall Inn that was used as a place for them to congregate, and as eventually in 1969 they got sick of it and they fought back, and those were known as the Stonewall riots, and they were technically the first gay pride. The first parade happened the year after that to commemorate them. But what I want folks to realize is that when you live your entire life being told that who you are is wrong, not only wrong, but it's disgusting, and that it's something to be ashamed of and to keep a secret, when you finally find your people and your place in society, whether you're a gay or a bi or a trans person, that sense of pride comes from a long, hard journey that you fought and that you won. You survived it. You're still here. And you realize intimately for the first time that, in my case, I'm gay, and that's not something I have to be ashamed of. And there are people who love me and who accept me, and that I have a place in this world, and I can be someone who exists without feeling like I'm an error or a mistake. And religion has done a bang-up job of, at least the execution of religion by a lot of Christians, has done a bang-up job of making us feel like we're mistakes and that we're wrong. That's where the pride comes from. After that long road, when you finally can say, I'm good. I'm good being gay. I'm fine with that. I can be proud of it because we did earn that pride. It was hard won. And that's why we say that we're proud, and that's why we have pride. It's not because we think being gay is something intrinsically better than being straight, no. Or being trans is something intrinsically better than being cisgender, no. We're proud of the journey that we fought, the battle that we fought and won and survived. That's why we're proud, and that's why we have pride.
Man, I literally, the whole time you were talking, I was like, ooh, yeah, this is what I'm going to say when he's done. And then you would say what I was about to say.
Well, good.
I mean, yeah, that's the whole thing. I am not super into the idea of being proud of something you didn't earn. Being proud of something that's simply a circumstance of your birth. Like, oh, I'm proud to be an American. Cool. I was proud that random chance meant that I was born in a specific place. That's silly.
It is silly. Nationalism is completely silly.
But what a lot of people don't realize, like you said, is that we did earn who we are. Mm-hmm. Because we do have to suffer and sacrifice for it.
And in a lot of cases, we're still fighting for it every day.
Absolutely. And many times, even under the best of circumstances. I mean, I'm not sure that I've met a trans person who's had things better than I have. And I've still had to fight very, very hard to be who I am. Yeah. And to get to be at a point where I'm okay. I mean, a lot of times you're just fighting against yourself even. And these ideas that you grow up with about what gender and sexuality is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And even for gay people, you struggle with what gender is supposed to be, because the reason that society hates gay people is because, being gay is not what a man or a woman is supposed to do, quote unquote.
Exactly.
So we grow up with these ideas and we internalize you have mother culture whispering in your ear your entire life that, when you grow up, you're going to find a girl, you're going to fall in love, you're going to get married, you're going to have kids, and that's what you need to be happy, because that's what the default human is, and that's what the default human does. And you recognize that, that's not what I want for my life. That's not who I am. And you immediately feel bad for it. You feel less than. You feel like you're not part of the society that you live in.
Yeah.
Because that's the message that you get. And that's how generally speaking society feels about people like us.
Yeah, it's reinforced through peers, through leaders, through your friends and family, and it's something you constantly have to deal with.
So in a lot of ways, standing up and just coming out and just saying, I'm gay, I'm trans, I'm bi, I'm pansexual, even just saying the words is a revolutionary act. Mm-hmm. Because you're declaring no, I'm not the default human that society thinks you should be. And you know what? I'm okay with that.
And a lot of times that means by saying that, you're giving up friendships. And when I say giving up, it's not because of you, but some folks will refuse to want to be close to you anymore if they find out that you're gay or trans or bi. And losing friends and family members is a very real thing that we've had to deal with.
It sucks. It sucks bad. I've been in the same room as my aunt a couple of times, since she basically told me that she wasn't even willing to talk to me about, respecting my preferred pronouns and calling me Callie. And I mean, the tension in the air is palpable. You know what I mean? I shouldn't have to feel like that when I'm in the same room as my aunt that helped raise me for the first half of my life.
Yeah.
And, the fact that I am proud of the fact that I've been able to make a life that's happy despite that. And that I've been able to stand up and do these things and, be part of organizations that are making a change and, give comfort to other people who aren't as privileged as I am when it comes to accepting friends and accepting families and accepting communities. The fact that I have all of that is why I'm able to now try and help create some of that for people who don't have it. And, I say this all the time, and I think it's worth saying again, sort of closing this whole thing out, is people say lots of really complimentary things about me all the time. And I appreciate it because I'm an egotist. But the thing that I think is really important for people to realize is the only reason that I've been able to be so open, so honest, and so vulnerable is because of the support that I get when I do. If I had posted my coming out letter on Facebook and gotten a whole ton of negative responses, I would not be where I am now. I'm not even sure that I would be out and have started transition by now. Wow. And it's only because of the support that I've gotten from other people that I've been able to do anything that I've done that anyone considers positive.
Yeah, and I can say the same for myself. My whole coming out journey, going back to my early 20s, it was amazing support from my friends that's continued to this day, and from my brother and my sister-in-law that and other members of my family that made that possible.
So I want to close this segment out by playing some interviews that I recorded at Cincinnati Pride this past Friday or Saturday. Yeah, it was Saturday. I talked with some local organizations, some local committees of national organizations about what they do, what their place is, what their mission is. And I think it's important for people to know these organizations because I don't think I've really ever highlighted these organizations on the show before. So the first one that I want to talk about, because I unfortunately didn't get an interview with anyone from HRC, but since I'm on the local steering committee for HRC, I feel like I can speak at least a little bit. So the Human Rights Campaign is the country's largest civil rights organization that advocates on behalf of the LGBTQ community. Their big thing really is, passing laws that are LGBT friendly and workplace equality and anti-discrimination laws, things like that. They were one of the biggest pushers in the marriage equality fight. I will say HRC and the trans community have a colored history. One glaring example was that when the Employment Non-Discrimination Act was working its way through Congress, they dropped gender identity protections from it to make it easier to pass, and HRC continued to support the bill despite that. There are many other examples of this. But
does everyone know what HRC is?
Human Rights Campaign.
Yeah, whenever you see those blue squares with the yellow equal sign,
yes,
that's HRC.
Exactly. Or the red squares with the light red equal sign. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Yes.
But they have pledged as an organization to do better on trans issues. And the reason that I've gotten involved with them personally is because I want to make sure that happens. The Cincinnati steering committee here locally has been pretty great. They helped pay a lot of the costs for the Leila Alcorn Vigil. Their workplace equality committee was largely instrumental in getting Macy's to include trans health benefits in their insurance for their employees. So the Cincinnati committee has been pretty great. I don't really have a ton of gripes with them or anything like that. So that's the HRC Human Rights Campaign. You can just hrc.org if you're interested in knowing more. And I'm going to go ahead and play the interviews with the other organizations that I found. All right, so tell me who you are and who you're here with.
My name is Jonah Yokoyama. I'm a registered nurse and the director of Heartland Trans Wellness Group.
Newly minted director, I understand. Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much.
So talk to me about Heartland Trans Wellness and what you guys do.
So Heartland Trans Wellness Group serves 13 different states. Most of our programming is focused in the Cincinnati area, but we have services for all of the 13 Midwestern states that are in our logo. We do peer support groups. We have 2 currently running. One is for trans-identified individuals only, and the other is open to the community, so friends and family can come as well. And the name of these groups is Cincinnati Trans Community Group. We also have resources for parents, for partners, kind of for anybody and everybody. We do education, both for individuals about their own care, transition-related needs, both social, legal, and medical. We do referrals to providers. We help educate providers, individuals, the families, all the way up to businesses and organizations and the government.
That's awesome. So, you mentioned that one of the groups is for trans people only, and I think maybe for people who aren't trans, they may not necessarily understand, the concept of needing a safe space that only trans people are in. Can you kind of talk about that and why that's an important thing?
Okay. So I think in this country, it's fair to say that it's a very gendered experience from before birth. Our parents tend to slap pink or blue on everything. And so from a very young age, we are acculturated to gender and to very defined binary genders. And as trans people navigate everyday life, they're often going through micro-traumas. So getting misgendered, having difficulties here and there and everywhere, having to defend their identities. So we provide a safe space for folks to be who they are.
That's so cool. So talk to me a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of what you guys do as far as helping folks transition, the things that you do as far as education, all that sort of stuff, just more detailed about the kind of things that you do, because I think, as far as I know, there's 2 trans-specific groups here, so those resources are badly needed. So talk a little bit more about, so let's talk more about the specific needs of the trans community versus, a umbrella LGBT group.
So trans folks, in general, they have fairly simple needs. They need access to medical care. They don't necessarily need psychiatric care. Sometimes people have stresses related to their transition, and usually that's how society's interacting with them. We see a lot of folks who have anxiety or depression, but when they actually get to transition, that magically lifts really quickly. So it's not this innate thing for a trans person. So trans people also often need some education about their own care, because they go to providers, and the providers don't know much either. So we're educating the providers and we're educating the individuals. I actually am doing a workshop next Wednesday to help folks on testosterone and injectable hormones learn more about how to do them safely, correctly, kind of troubleshooting things and answering questions. So we do that sort of thing. We help them figure out what kind of providers they need, what kind of hoops they have to jump through to get the access of care through the insurance companies, that sort of thing. And then, there's the whole legal aspect. When can I change what form of document? And, that depends on which state you're in. It's all different in every state.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Jonah.
Sure. Thank you.
And to learn more, you can go to transwellness.org. Okay, so tell me who you are and who you're here with.
Hi, my name is MJ Tudor, and I am here with GLSEN Greater Cincinnati. And GLSEN stands for the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network.
Very cool. So talk to me about GLSEN. Tell me what you do and what you're about.
Okay, so GLSEN is all about creating safe spaces and safe schools for all students, including our LGBTQ youth. We are working directly in the schools, working to change policy, enumerating policies to include gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. We are also working directly in the schools with the GSTAs, the Gay, Straight, Trans Alliances, and trying to help build up those groups to better support our youth. We also provide professional development to educators as well as at mental health providers and anyone who's really inquiring about our resources. We provide a weekly youth group for our high school youth that meets every Monday night. Right now we have about 35 youth currently attending. We also provide our yearly youth summit, which is a day of workshops and trainings. It is free for educators, parents, and youth. This last year we also had a dance afterwards that was enticing to our youth to stay around. With that said, we do our yearly alternative prom that is free for our youth to attend, and we have the adult safe space array that helps support our youth endeavors throughout the year. We just work actively in the community to try and spread the word, and again, just creating safe spaces for all of our LGBTQ youth.
Very cool. So talk to me about the actual situation. Tell me how things are, where things were, how far things have come, if it's progressed, if it's gotten worse, if it's gotten better. Talk to me just about kind of the general situation.
Okay, so I could say right now we're probably involved with about 30 schools. I think there is still a ton of work to be done, especially in regards to reaching our middle schools and our elementary schools. We are mostly in high schools, but we're getting a lot of requests for younger students seeking resources and help. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but it does seem we have seen some success in groups being created, GSTAs. I think we had 3 new GSTAs that were created this last year that have really been thriving. We have a Catholic GSTA that we actually just awarded a grant to better grow their group and to be inclusive and supportive of their students. So definitely some progress, but there's still a lot of work to be done in the greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky metropolitan area.
Awesome. MJ, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
To find more, you can go to glisten.org. That's GLSEN.org. All right, guys, I'm here with Jamie Sivers from A Voice for the Innocent. Jamie, tell me, what is A Voice for the Innocent and why are you guys here?
So we are a community of support for people who are affected by rape and sex abuse. And we are here essentially because there are people here. We're an all-inclusive group, and we cater to anybody. We allow anybody to tell their story on our website, which is avfti.org. And we come where their people are. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men have been affected by sex crimes, and those numbers even go up within the gay community. So we come here and reach out to people and talk to them and let them know that we exist and get to know people.
Awesome. So, full disclosure, I used to be a member of the board of A Voice for the Innocent. I was involved with it when it started, and Jamie is one of my best friends. So, talk about the website. People go there to tell their stories. People respond. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so people go on there. They only need an email to sign up, which obviously you can create a new one if you don't want someone to know yours. And then they go to the website and they choose their own username. So, like, literally anything, and your level of anonymity is up to you. You can tell your story in as much detail or as vague as you'd like to. And then, like, literally everyone that's involved with us checks the website, and we'll go back and, we talk to you and we let you know that, things aren't your fault. And, like, even after hearing a generic statement, like, we tell you it's not your fault, like, we make it more personal and we talk to you and hear you out and talk to you about your story. And if you need, we help you find counseling or we'll help you find legal resources. We've done both of those things for people before. And we really just... We aren't a crisis website. Like, people don't come to us in crisis. It's more when they're ready to kind of start reclaiming their story and stop, holding it inside, and they're ready to start talking about it and own it and make it their own. So that's where we come in.
So talk about the focus on telling your story. Tell me why that's important.
Telling your story is really the first step to recovery. I mean, it's almost it's synonymous with, but not. I mean, this is a bad example, but essentially an addict saying, I have a problem. It's like that very first thing, saying, like, hey, this happened to me, and just that telling of your story, just that first step is a really big step for some people, and it relieves a lot of weight. And, like, I've been telling my story for years and years and years, and still every single time someone posts their story, I find something in common with them, or, like, something that I hadn't thought about, or, like, it's just, maybe a feeling that I didn't realize I was feeling, that, like, maybe I thought I was the only one or something like that. Like, I see that all the time, and I've been telling my story for over a decade, So, like, it's just, we really like putting together that human connection. And when you start to tell your story, especially when people are responding and saying, hey, this happened to me, or hey, I'm so sorry, or hey, you're valuable, you're loved. Like, when that starts to happen, like, there's a lot of pressure that's relieved, I think, for people a lot of times. So that's why we exist and why we have that platform for them.
So you mentioned your story. Tell me a little bit about that.
So I was sexually abused for 3 years by my father, from like 6th to 8th grade, right around in there. And, obviously I didn't live with him, but I was over there every other weekend. And finally decided that, like, it hit a point that I wasn't comfortable with any of it, but I pretty much said no more. And I decided to tell my mom, and she got me into counseling and built up a support system around me. She made sure that I knew I was loved. She made sure I knew that it wasn't my fault. So I've just never been shy about my story. So I did go through counseling. We had to go through court. Like, there was a bunch of stuff we did, but after a while, I just kind of became comfortable talking about it. And I would always tell people, as I was growing up, like through high school and into college, I would say, hey, this happened to me. And so many people said, like, me too, but you're the first person I've ever told. So eventually I thought, like, why? Why isn't there a safe place for people to tell their story in person if they want, or anonymously if they want, like however they want? So that's kind of what we created. And the truth is, like, if you look, there are other places where you can tell their story. I think one of the main differences with us and them, though, is that we actually try to go out and find people. With numbers like 1 in 3 and 1 in 6, you go to any large group of people, you're going to find people who have been affected, and you're going to find people who haven't told anybody. So that's I think the difference between us is we're actively seeking out people to say, hey, we've got a spot for you if you need it.
And people in marginalized communities too. I think that's a big thing. A lot of times I think people have this sort of, they'll set up at more mainstream events, but A Voice for the Innocent goes to things like Pride or music festivals, stuff like that. People who aren't normally reached out to those, by those kinds of efforts. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Pride, music festivals, comic conventions, like small community parades, like. We'll go to the big events, and we just got invited on to Warped Tour, so we're going to be doing some dates of Warped Tour. We really like those kind of like you said, the marginalized communities or the underserved communities for whatever reason. And like there are so many groups that they will go out and do events, but it's going to be like, hey, we're having a violence prevention event at a university. Do you want to come sit up? Like, we totally are in favor of those, and we'll go do those too. But it really kind of, like, people have to be already going to a violence prevention event to find people there, whereas we really try to meet people where they are. You going to a comic convention and do you maybe have something to say? We'll see you there. Are you going to Pride and you maybe have something to say? We'll see you there. Like, that's what we're trying to do. And that's certainly not to like shake a fist or anything at those violence prevention events, because they're such a great resource for students who are already on campus, or for people who are working in this social work field to know what else is out there. Like, they're certainly important, and we love those events, but I think our heart is in events like Pride, events like Cincy Comic Con, stuff like that. So
awesome. Jamie, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And to find out more about A Voice for the Innocent, you can check out avfti.org. All right, I'm here with Jim Helton. He is the president of Tri-State Freethinkers, as among many, many other things. Jim, talk to me about being the atheist group at Pride. Tell me why you think that's important.
Equal rights is the number one thing we do. It is the most important. We support the LGBTQ community full-heartedly, but we also find in equal rights violations, it's usually the church, unfortunately, and religion is behind it all.
So, talk to me about people in the faith community. Obviously, there are lots of faith community allies for the LGBT community, and I think it's important to not turn allies away, but I also think the conversation about religion is important. So talk to me about working that out.
Correct. I mean, we're even joining the Faith Community Alliance. I have the application on my desk that we're filling out. So we work with faith-based communities. But, overall religion's the elephant in the room that everybody's afraid to talk about. And it's not just LGBT. Marriage equality, abortion, women's rights, dying with dignity. The list goes on, and religion's been on the wrong side of every issue.
Okay, so talk to me about Tri-State Freethinkers. What do you guys do? What's the mission? Just tell me about the group in general.
The acronym we use is ACES. Activism we do, it's probably the most important thing that we do. Equal rights being that. We do community. We do about 50 community service projects a year, and a whole range of things. So on birthday parties for the homeless kids, we feed the homeless August 1st at the Hosea House. We build homes. I mean, we do a million things there. We also do an education piece twice a month. One of those is strictly dedicated to science. The other is informational, can be on a wide range of topics, whether that be human trafficking. We bring in ex-Muslims or ex-Scientology, ex-pastors. And then we do a social element as well. Frisbee golf, game nights, movie nights, picnics, whatever that may be, to give that community. Because that's the one thing I thought the church had over us years ago, that sense of community. I don't think they can say that anymore with the group that we've built.
Right, 60,000 people at Pride, I think, says otherwise, right?
Absolutely.
So what's the response been today? I mean, it's 3:00. The festival started at 11. Lots of people coming by the booth. Tell me what the response has been like.
It's been great. We decided before we had costumes and we had a bunch of signs, banners. We've been doing this for years. But this time we decided to go with one message and one message only as a test case to see that. And our banner said the main obstacle to equality is religion. And we saw a gas on a few people's faces, but overall we got cheers and people supporting us and pointing. They didn't know we existed, and that's really the message we want to get out is there are people just like you that have that community that support you, and it was very, very positive.
Awesome. That's so cool to hear. Jim, thank you so much for taking the time out. I know it's a super busy festival. Looking forward to being involved with you guys here in Cincinnati.
Absolutely. Can't wait.
And to find out more about Tri-State Freethinkers, you can go to www.meetup.com/tri-state-freethinkers. We'll be back with Be a Better Ally on the Gaytheist Manifesto.
Visit secularmediagroup.com to see how we're changing the world.
I'm Daniel Radcliffe, and I believe that reaching out for help is the bravest thing a person can do. If you are struggling and need support, call the Trevor Lifeline at 1-866-488-7386. It's free and confidential, and trained counsellors are there to listen 24/7 without judgment. To learn more about the Trevor Project's life-saving work for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or questioning young people, go to thetrevorproject.org.
So finally, this week's Be a Better Ally segment. So basically the theme for this segment is, let's just pretend like marriage equality didn't happen. And I don't mean to say that to dismiss the importance of marriage equality, because marriage equality is important. It's important to many people that I love. It's important to me personally, and I think it's important socially. Mm-hmm. But as stated in the previous, in the first segment in the show, there are still many fights to be won that very literally mean people's lives. So the message here is to not rest on our laurels and to not spend too much time patting ourselves on the back because we've won this particular fight. Because this particular fight is a small part of a very, very large picture.
Yeah, I know that we all want to celebrate this moment, and it's worthy of celebrating, and that's what we're doing. Now we get to roll up our sleeves and get back to work. And I know that we covered a lot of topics in this episode, and I hope that it was enlightening for some folks who think that, or who may have assumed that marriage equality, it was sort of the apex of our fight, and it wasn't. It was a milestone along the way. So our straight allies are so important to this movement. I just want to encourage you to link up with your local groups, talk to your friends who are gay and bi and trans, your queer friends, and ask how you can help to continue this, because we still have a long way to go, like Callie said, and none of this would be possible without allies. So we appreciate you and we love you, and let's keep going.
Yeah, I think that was well said. In the previous segment, I highlighted some of the more national oriented queer and trans organizations that are doing this work, and I would encourage anyone, if this is a cause that you believe in, get involved with those organizations. You do not have to be LGBT to get involved. You just have to care. Mm-hmm. There are many straight allies on, that volunteer with GLSEN. There are straight allies who volunteer with Heartland Trans Wellness. There are straight allies who volunteer with HRC. The first HRC event that I ever did, I think it was about half and half straight folks and gay folks that volunteered for the event, because we care about this cause. And speaking specifically to our friends in the atheist community, we heard Jim from Tri-State Freethinkers talk about how, religion is the barrier to equality in so many places. And so, I almost think that atheist activism is LGBT activism by proxy, if that makes sense.
They go hand in hand in a lot of ways.
Which is kind of why this show exists and continues to exist. But, there are so many organizations doing so much good work surrounding these problems and so many issues. It's very easy to be overwhelmed by the scope of the problem and how much how much work there is left to be done. Freaking FSM knows that I've been overwhelmed and just thinking like there is so much going on. How in the hell would I ever be able to make a dent in this? And the answer is that you just get up and do it. Mm-hmm. And, if that means, if your position is to where all you can really do is post something on Facebook, then do that thing. If you can get involved and go volunteer at an event, give 2 hours of your time to a booth at Pride, or, give 2 hours of your time at an event like the Transgender Day of Remembrance, stuff like that. Do that thing. You do not have to make your life about activism to make a difference.
Yeah, and I want a lot of straight folks to know that you can help turn the tide of culture as far as it relates to our movement. You can help stand up for us in just those small moments, like when someone's making a joke. You don't have to stand for it. And things like that. You can, reach out to your queer friends, just letting them know that they're not alone. Things like that make a big difference, even if they seem small.
Yeah, sociology research very, very strongly suggests that what really changes people's mind is the pressure of their social group.
Yes.
My mind has been changed by, editorials that I've read or news pieces that I've seen, stuff like that. I've definitely been swayed and convinced by those things. But what, generally speaking, really changes people's minds is seeing the people around them change, and that social pressure and that exposure. Frankly, I think Daniel and I have both been vulnerable enough on this show that I think any of our listeners can claim at least a little bit to know a gay and a trans person.
Sure.
Because we've talked about these things, and we've talked about how these things affect us personally, not just as abstract social justice concepts, but how they affect us as human beings. And I would say, anyone who's listened to this show is at least a little bit qualified to, if you're in the room and there's not a gay or a trans person in the room to speak up for themselves, I would think that if you've listened to enough of this show, you're at least a little bit qualified to speak up on our behalf. And I can't understate the significance of someone actually doing that.
I agree. It's a powerful thing. And it's just, it's very similar to, if someone's telling a racist joke, you're not going to laugh. You're going to say, that's not funny.
Right.
or someone's telling...
Explain that to me. Tell me why that's funny. I don't get it.
Or a misogynistic joke. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same.
Well, friends, that is going to do it for another episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto on Secular Media Network. You can find us online at facebook.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto. You can email us at thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com. And on Twitter, I am Gaytheist Callie.
And I'm on Twitter at Daniel Wolfsong.
Before we go, I want you to know that if you're hurting, if you're scared, if you're lost, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know that there is a community out here who loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. This is the Gaytheist Manifesto.